Hello, everybody. What if a Buddha could smoke, drink, have sex, and still be completely pure? That sounds insane, but from the point of view of a realization, it can make a strange kind of sense. In this video, I'm interviewing Albert Hahn. Albert realized Anatta, what most people consider to be the end of the spiritual path, at age 20. He spent years in deep practice, received extensive Vajrayana training and empowerments, worked as an art teacher and a professional baker, and is now mentoring inside the Contemplative CrossFit. What's on your mind? We'll talk about the difference between I Am-ness and Anatta, insights versus experiences versus realization, why emptiness might not be the end of the path, what crazy wisdom actually means, and how realization relates to sexuality, afflictions, purity, and the ordinary life, the importance of having a teacher, and why it's sometimes difficult to relate with other realized beings. We also get into one of the hardest questions in spirituality. Can someone be completely free and still appear unconventional, chaotic, or even scandalous from the outside? Next week, Albert is going to be part of the Contemplative CrossFit crew that is hosting the Public Practice Week. It's from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Registration link is in the description. If you're curious about the 90-day bootcamp, or if this video is triggering something in you, come test your Relational Fitness, brah. Here's an excerpt from one of the discussions led by Albert.
Because your nature of mind is not affected at all. It's completely stainless and pure. So that's where like the whole tantric whole idea of doing unconventional actions like eating meat, fornicating, all these things come into play where traditionally you would renounce these things, right? Though you can't even look at a woman. What if from the point of view of inherent purity, it's not a problem? How can we move into these things fully and then bridge it realization to, well, everyday people so that they can have the millisecond chance to connect to his mind stream? It's kind of what a Buddha fundamentally is doing. He is eating, he is smoking weed, he is smoking cigarettes, he is fornicating, he is drinking. Why would he do that? It's a mind fuck. He does that so he can make a bridge. He can relate. From this point of view, you can really understand someone like Trungpa Rinpoche. On a basic modern level, he just looks like an abuser. He looks crazy. He looks insane. But from the point of view of realization, it just makes absolute sense. He's just planting seeds. You have hippies who just smoke weed all the time. He relates with them. He gets them to wear suits, work a job. It's like, what the fuck? Trungpa Rinpoche would sleep with anyone. But can you imagine a Buddha not having that restriction? It's like inconceivable. Well, I'm not saying all Buddhas are like that, but it's like, yeah, you seduce them and then fuck, get a job. What do you mean? You have to grow up. What? Like, aren't we just gonna be in love and light? It's complicated because it's like literally when we enter that territory, it's unconventional and it's not based on the human logic.
What's up, Albert?
Hey, man.
Welcome to the show. This
Pleasure.
is the Contemplative CrossFit 60 Minutes.
Yes, excellent. Let's do it.
So Albert is actually the one that introduced us to Mei Chen, our head coach. I knew like there was more, but then I wasn't really looking. But then Khan was like, there's gotta be more teachings out there or like more teachers out there that can pave the way. And then we just looking around, and one of the blogs that we both really liked was ATR. And then I think he met you on ATR.
Yeah.
And then we had a call.
I was an admin in ATR, for a long time. They kept inviting me back every time I would leave a lot.
So you realize Anatta, what most people in the spiritual marketplace consider to be the quote-unquote end goal since you're like 20 years old. So you've been at this for a while, right?
Yeah, I realized I am, and then I met So on nudebuddhist.com.
On the forum. Another forum.
Yeah, and then he introduced me to Anatta, and then I practiced that for maybe like 6 months.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What's the I am? We know the distinction between I am-ness realization and then soul is like, okay, that's not the end. You experience like oneness, whatever. That's not Anatta yet.
I mean, pretty much across the board, anyone who's interacted on the internet, typically we would find the view of I am. Some rarefication of awareness, some rarefication of consciousness, beingness, the sense of I. Across the board, everyone, like pretty much.
You said the sense of I.
that.
How is that different from the sense of like the ego?
The ego, yeah. So basically, in these practices, you fundamentally distinguish the pure sense of I from a concept, fundamentally, and even body sense. So like, you would deconstruct all the different types of bodies you have. Anywhere identity can pin itself to, until identity itself collapses on itself. So it just becomes pure identity.
Okay. So at first I identify myself as a strength, as an ego, and then I pin it to awareness.
Yeah.
And that's the I amness, the sense
yes.
of like, I guess I am awareness, or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the big self.
So like basically, if you take away the I from the body, then there's no longer personality. Because the personality comes with the body, right?
Body and mind, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your whole psychology, your psyche, different types of, basically your personality, preferences, all kinds of things. But then if you just have a sense of just pure existence, pure aliveness, pure like being in presence, that just sense of I.
Is that what Eckhart Tolle mean by awareness in his book? The
Yes.
Power of Now, kind of, right?
Yes,
Most
that's
teachings
precisely
are
like
I-amness.
present moment, beingness,
Right.
Am-ness, I.
But that's very blissful, right? Or,
Yeah, it's very freeing, but it also is. It's not that the experience is wrong; it's that our cognitive obscurations fundamentally incorrectly interpret it. So it becomes very effortful, and we don't understand how within that is intrinsic existence, how we're constantly making it into a thing,
Oh, okay.
right?
So there's still a subtle sense of identity, like
Yeah. Well, it's just a big identity,
the big identity.
right?
Okay.
Or maybe we're able to deconstruct it, and then it becomes kind of all forms, right? That's kind of the no mind experience, right?
So if after that, there's a no mind experience. Or
Yeah.
is it-
So there's like different kinds of experiences of gradation. There's where I amness is like just a solid sense here. It could be the witness, but that witness spreads and becomes the whole body,
Okay.
and then goes beyond the body and globalizes into like your whole sphere,
Oh, okay.
right? That also could collapse and just become the sound or the form or the scent. That becomes the texture of awareness, right?
So according to the ATR map, that's the no mind.
That is no mind, but it's the Anatta experience actually, but it is technically no mind.
Right.
The insight isn't there.
Oh, the inside is in there.
Yeah, Anatta would be specifically there being no hearer in precisely the foreground of hearing as sound.
Just heard, only the heard, the seen, only the seen.
Yes,
That would be anatta.
precisely. Nothing extra
Nothing extra.
and nothing linking.
No subject, object, perceiver, perceive.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, but also no linking between sound and sound. No linking between sound and form. All of it is completely disjointed
Okay. Okay.
because there's no center,
All right. Right.
right?
Centerlessness.
Because center itself is just a sensation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is just like that isn't actually connected to another sensation.
Right. Right. Right.
Because all sensations are dislinked to each
Yeah.
other.
That's the insight right there.
Yeah.
It's
So
like
then
no cluster of sensations can look at another or hear another.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything hearing itself, sensing itself.
So then it just
contacting
it completely liberates on its own. There's nothing to do with it.
itself. Okay. So what got you to cross the chasm from like I amness to no mind to anatta? Was it with Soul's help, or like was it what kind of practice were you doing?
Basically,
Inquiry
I
or-
was doing the Sutra with it, where you just in seeing, just a scene, no seer, like just contemplating that, just within experience. It's like, oh, there just is no background actually, and the background is just an assumption of a sensation.
So prior to that, the background would be like some kind of a substrate, like a container.
Yeah.
of
Basically,
awareness.
you assume that there's a background,
Right.
right? You assume that that's the case, and you're not aware that you're assuming that. And actually, what you assume to be is just a sensation. There actually is no background.
So before that, you were practicing Vajrayana already, or did you
No.
discover Vajrayana after?
Vajrayana was way after that.
Was way after that.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you got to the anatta, that phase when you went from I amness to anatta, were you doing a lot of formal sitting, or were you just kind of contemplating your sensory feel, like moment to moment?
Mostly contemplating like sensory field moment to moment until it just became obvious like that's the case.
But so many people who go on the spiritual path for a very long time, they wouldn't know this distinction. What got you started in meditation in the first place?
I think fundamentally I read Be Here Now by Ram Dass.
Oh, okay.
That got me into psychedelics. And then once I had psychedelics, I was
All right, switch places. Here, can you hold this? Thanks.
I had an experience in which I was outside of myself entirely. Then I knew, okay, interesting. What I posit as myself isn't absolute. It actually is just a point of reference that I'm continually creating, but I don't have to do that. So that eventually led me to be interested in self-inquiry,
What's on your mind? Okay.
and led me to Ajahn Shante particularly.
Oh, I love Adeshanti.
Yeah.
actually, It's funny because most of his teachings are in the Am-ness, but
Yeah.
very late stages of his career,
Yeah.
he started talking about no self, but only to a certain portion of the public.
Yeah.
He made a course entirely dedicated to no self, but it's only a course that could be accessed if you already have like a preliminary practice or you have are already pretty deep into spirituality, because he doesn't. I guess maybe it could be dangerous to just get into Anatta right away if you don't have a base or something like that.
Yeah, I just don't think it's realistic. But it's also difficult for people who are obsessed with awareness
Yeah,
to even want to be interested in Anatta.
because you have to like deconstruct even the identity.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
of
why
awareness,
would
right?
you be interested? Because you think you have the thing.
Why were you interested then?
I had a lot of people in my life who presented the teachings of emptiness, presented a Buddhist view, while understanding kind of the Hindu view of like awareness. And
So it's like a merging of both, and like
in some sense, it's a refining.
refining. Okay,
It's like I had a friend who told me that your experience is valid,
right.
but you have to continue to refine the view.
Okay, refining the view. That's what we
Because
talked a
experience
lot
isn't, it's
about.
not incorrect. The
Right,
texture of being, like that is like ultimately like the point. But it's like the views that are obscuring it to be natural.
I see.
There's always a subtle like efforting.
Oh, I see what you mean. So because people can confuse insight with experience.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
And
then-
vice versa.
And vice versa. Or they can confuse realization with insight and vice
Yeah,
versa.
yeah, yeah.
So what is the, if someone is, were to ask you right now, what is the difference between, say, experience and insight? And then they describe their experiences as being like, oh, they're using all the right words and whatever. But how can you tell if that person has the insight versus just
Because
abiding experience?
in some sense, insight isn't experience. Insight is a particular thing about experience.
it's a particular thing about the experience.
Yeah, that's already the case that wasn't seen before.
Oh, okay.
Right?
That's a good point.
It's like there actually is no seer.
Right. There's never been a seer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, oh, okay. I don't need to create that. But the implications of that completely deconstruct. So that leads to experience, certainly. But if you're just focusing on experience and not the insight, then you continually have to fabricate the experience.
Oh, okay.
So it's like
I see what you mean. Oh, that's why when you said there was effort in there. You're trying to maintain some kind of experience.
Exactly. So if someone's always trying to maintain a state
That's interesting.
or an experience, or they're chasing a no mind, because they can have that experience, very much so,
Right.
if they know how to like fabricate it, but they don't understand the insight that leads to that. Particularly, like they're not working on the cognitive obscuration, particularly.
Right. The obscurity is what's in the way of seeing what's always and already the case.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, precisely. So in some
Very
sense,
clear.
you can have dry insight and have realization.
And then what about the experience? You can
Doesn't matter.
doesn't matter the experience.
Because from a certain point, experience is irrelevant.
irrelevant. Right. So experience is more like the byproduct of
Yes.
certain insight. But then most people just get stuck in an experience.
Because it's juicy.
Right. Because it's juicy.
But you also need that in a sense, like you need to be able to, like, without like being able to meditate on I am or be able to do that, then you really have no direct experience.
Right.
You know, like when people say, "Oh, do you have direct experience?" What does that mean?
Right.
You know, it's like, do I conceptualize it? Like, what does it mean to be direct, intimate? And I am-ness is that, right?
Right.
So, like from there, inquiry is what makes sense.
Right. It's hard to do inquiry without abiding the I am-ness.
Yeah. Well, this
from
is
my
why
experience.
there's shamatha and vipassana, right?
Right.
And shamatha, you're creating a calm state.
Right.
But that's not insight, right? A concentration will never be insight.
Right.
Bliss, none of it.
Yeah.
But like with that, like one-pointedness, precision, you investigate impermanence, different things, like about the nature of like your experience. So then from there, it's like you get the insight, and that leads to tremendous freedom.
So what would you say is the difference between insight and realization?
Have the insight and its fullest implications in your particular life,
Oh, wow, okay, I see what you mean.
right? Because you can have a cognitive insight, it's fine, but you can just sit there and be fine, okay. But what you play out the implications in your whole life,
Okay.
head to toe, and that's like a lifetime journey. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So after the whole ATR journey, what did you do? Like apparently the Anatta thing, which most people consider that to be the end, right? So apparently for you, that was one of the things that motivated Khan to talk to you. It's like,
Yeah.
you realized Anatta like 20 years ago, whatever, but then what did you do within this like 20 years?
I sought a master because I realized, so what? You on the cushion, you're fine. You realize Anatta, you're free. Then what? There's more to life than that. your relationships, your life. You have violence, you have sexuality, you have your emotions. Like, I mean, like, I'm
So
still
Anatta
alive.
doesn't cure everything. It's not doesn't solve anything.
I mean, it might, but it didn't. You know, it didn't for me.
It didn't for you to
Particularly.
solve everything for you. Okay.
Yeah, because there's more to life. We're not just. I don't know if it. I don't want to reduce what I realized to a cognitive understanding, because it's not that. It definitely had experiential, physical changes, but no, it wasn't enough. In particular, I was also interested in the Dzogchen teachings
In Dzogchen teachings.
with that as well. Right after that, and I couldn't actually practice the Dzogchen teachings. So then I looked for a Vajra master.
So why couldn't you practice Dzogchen?
Oh, it was just too advanced.
Even after Anatta
Yeah,
realizing
yeah.
nature mind, it was still too.
Yeah.
How is this too advanced? Because I heard Dzogchen is like, if you realize Anatta and you just yoke into the nature mind, it's easy. It's direct.
I don't think I was mature enough as a person.
As a person, interesting. So you need to have your shit together in order to even practice Dzogchen.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But did you thought you could? You tried it and then you're like,
Yeah, I couldn't. So then I realized I needed to see someone who knows more than me.
what was the practice that made you realize you needed to get your shit together in order to fully practice Dzogchen?
Fuck, just do it enough, realize I can't actually do it. Yeah.
Like,
I tried to practice Chakchot, I couldn't do it.
oh, okay. Chakcho, like, what
Yeah.
is that?
It's the ability to rest in nature mind. And it completely cuts all fabrication and cuts all karma.
And you have to sustain that, like,
Yeah.
ideally 24/7 to
Yeah.
like reach Buddhahood, right?
Pretty
Would you
much.
say? Okay. So, but there was still a lot of obscuration or obstructions in your life that
Yeah,
you
which
couldn't
I
maintain
just
Chakcho
couldn't.
from.
I could do it briefly, but not
Oh, I see.
not in a way that is actually sustaining.
Okay. So how did you seek out this master that?
Kind of like, wow, there's a master here, and this whole time
So
I
when
didn't
you
know.
heard the interview, what clicked?
he was able to use all the language ATR is using
Oh.
in his own way. And also being able to distinguish awareness from emptiness. And then also presenting a path beyond all that. Like, oh, just Anatta, emptiness is just actually the beginning of Vajrayana. What the fuck? What is Vajrayana then?
Oh, interesting. Well, the way I used to understand Vajrayana, or even now, is that it's the third turning of the wheel of Dharma.
I think like how even like the ATR like presents like Dzogchen, for instance, is very sutric based, right? Like they didn't realize that, but how even like Western people approach Dzogchen is all sutra.
So Western people don't know actually the authentic version of Vajrayana. That
Yeah, which is
they
no
would
different.
practice
Than,
it
which is
Tibet.
no different than Dzogchen.
oh, so Vajrayana and Dzogchen is actually
The same thing.
The same thing. Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, but it's like they come at it from a sutric lens.
For the ATR people, or for like
For most, actually,
pragmatic Dharma?
most modern Dzogchen, this is very sutric lens.
Okay. So what would be the difference between the Sutra lens and the Vajrayana lens?
I mean, like if you just want to get into philosophy, it's radically different in their views of. Basic in Sutra, you basically you have a bowl of afflictions and you empty out the bowl of afflictions, right? So then you have an empty mind. You don't have any more afflictions. Like that makes sense, right? You purify, you get rid of negativity, then you're free.
So like an arhat route. right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Vajrayana Dzogchen says, from the start, you're free.
You're the Buddha already.
Yes. So how do you start from fruition? There's nothing to empty. It's silly. There's no substance to empty.
So what is the practice?
So the practice is that we use that against actually our afflictions. What are our afflictions? Well, we don't see that. We have mistaken view. So it's very simple. You contrast the fruition with where we're at and let it mingle.
In our book camp, Machen says we pay homage to our afflictions.
Yes.
Is it something like that, or we realize the unconditioned through, with, and as the conditions themselves? That's the way I understand it.
This depends on how we want to view it, but fundamentally afflictions aren't a problem.
Not a problem. Like sexuality, emotions, none of it you need to get rid of.
None of it's a problem, it's our view about it. We just see it incorrectly. So because we see it in a distorted way, it becomes a problem. But if you don't see it in a distorted way, there's something else entirely. Yeah.
So let's say if you follow the sutra route and you just purify yourself and then you just go live life. What's wrong with that?
Would you want to live life?
You mean after I purify everything, would I
Yeah.
want to live life? I don't know. I'm already living life, so it's hard for me to say.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
my style has always been mingling with life itself.
because it's really anti everything. It's just like.
But can you even maintain that state while living in samsaric existence?
I don't think so. I think you would have to go to the absolute renunciate route,
You just gotta
becoming
go to
a monk and
monastery.
nun. Yep.
Okay. Because the whole Arahat route is built from the convention of
Yeah. So it's absolutely useless for,
monastery,
in my opinion, useless for modern people.
useless.
Absolutely useless. It's not for modern.
So all these people that are practicing modern spirituality are confused. Vipassana.
They're fucked.
They're fucked. Okay.
Because it just can't fit.
They can't fit. Okay.
It's a contradiction.
I think I see that a lot. People have some insight and they try to go back to life, and then
How do you
how do I integrate or whatever?
Yeah, you
They
can't.
figure it out. But you kind of found your path by seeking out your master, right?
Yeah, the question I fundamentally always had as a practitioner from the start was, how can I be here in appearance and be free? Like, no contradiction. There had to be a way. Intuitively, I was like, there has to be a way. It's not like there's freedom and then there's appearance. There has to be a way to be here.
Off cushion, on cushion.
Yeah, in the complexity of this.
Right.
Like in the nuanced complexities of stress, the fucking problems. Like, without negating any of it, how can I be free? Like, that's the question I had.
So tell me about your meeting with your Lama.
We're gonna get you to do a lot of work and a lot of prostrations. And then I started Nondro.
You started what?
Nondro, 4 basic preliminaries,
Okay.
which you do about 100,000 sets of, each types of practices. They're basically the practice you do before entering a mandala, before even getting the teachings. You have to kind of do this thing. Takes about 2-3 years of practice if you do 3 hours a day consistently. So it's kind of like college.
So it's not even insight based or anything like that. It's just like prostration or.
It's the thing, yeah. Vajrayana is interesting because the teachings are presented in a way that's not necessarily linguistic or the way Sutra views it. It's really based on imagery, symbol. It's really based on symbol. Yeah.
Can you expound that a little bit?
So like from the
visualization.
Usually, Dharma is like, sutras, the teachings of Dharma, right? The words of the Buddha, right? In Tantra, it is actually the image itself, or it is actually the mantra itself. It's kind of like a packet of information that you download and you have to mine over time, and it just becomes the insights in you.
How is that a symbol though?
So
Because you said the image itself is the
yeah.
fruit, right?
It is, but symbol as a presentation. Yeah. The image itself as the symbol, which is the thing itself,
Right.
elaborates through practice. So if you work a mantra, if you work a visualization, over time, the insight you'll just get it.
The insight would just become a byproduct or something like that, or
It'll become very obvious.
become very obvious.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the only practices I know is Deity Yoga. Let's say you visualize.
That's what we're talking about.
Okay, so something like that. So let's say you visualize yourself being a deity. Have you done a lot of that?
Yeah.
So how would you arrive at insight by visualizing yourself as a deity?
No, there's many insights to gather. Like for instance, like if the deity is always sitting on a lotus, and then sitting on a moon and sun disk, those very much represent very specific things. Like you can study it conceptually, but to actualize the actual meaning, like within you, you have to become it, quite literally. And then it's a question of how do I become something? I'm Albert doing this practice, but like you can't actually do that then. You actually have to like learn to completely dismount that whole I on from you and apply that I onto the deity. How do you do that? Because it can't be me doing the practice. It'll never work. So if you have to have the capacity to become empty, and then from there, follow the current of luminosity, and then from there, everything that arises from there on, it's not me, it's the deity.
So how would you take that practice and bring it off the cushion?
If you actually did the practice, there would be no off the cushion. You would be living in a different reality set, whole cloth. So, but if you can't actually do that, you have to, gradually do it, right? We'll practice it conceptually, right? But if you were to do it completely, there's no longer your world. There is no world. That's what you learn. A world is a generated being. We are actually, both of us, if we are being Frank or Albert, generating Frank.
So the insight is you're fabricating.
You're already doing it.
Yeah.
We as humans already do it
doing it.
perfectly. We're just doing the jujitsu where we do something else.
Oh.
Does that make sense? So these processes are already occurring, right? It's like you're just catching it where you can and then shifting it into a completely different set.
But isn't it true that all practices have to be kind of self-invalidated? So even like the deity of your body, you kind of have to see.
So in every sadhana,
Yeah.
there's always a completion practice, which is the dissolution of the deity.
Right.
Right? Which is like, oh, we created this thing, we're this thing now, and like, okay, now we have to dissolve it. We completely dissolve it. And then you realize, and you dissolve, and you realize. So the post-meditation practice is like fundamentally seeing the world purely. What is that attacking fundamentally is the view that anything is ordinary.
Or solid, or it has a fixed identity or whatever.
Yeah, fixed identity, but like ordinary, like conventional, like, oh, you're you, we're humans, this water, we're on earth. Like these are all like
Views, right?
just ideas. Ideas we impute. Pinnacle fruition of that practice is that that absolutely collapses.
Right.
So then the world is entirely different set.
But isn't it true that you can also become attached or identify with that world you created? It's like maybe
course,
people
you
get
can-
trapped in deity realms. And
So
stuff
that's
like that,
making the deity into a demon.
right.
Yeah. That's why the emptiness factor is foremost.
Right. Emptiness has to seep in order to even do that practice.
And then
without
there are
verifying.
practitioners who did do that and they become, basically dark magicians.
Oh, okay.
They just horrible things. Like they
Does
just
that happen a lot? Like people you come across practitioners, or
doesn't happen a lot,
uh,
but it happens to people, yeah. Because you have a lot of power, then
interesting.
it's like if you don't realize it's empty, then it's paramount to realize it's empty.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Other than the prostration and the spiritual practices, like obviously you said your goal was to, live life as that, right? So there must be a lot of practices
Yeah.
in just life itself without even going to the deities, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, just in a lot of sense, fundamentally comes down to mindfulness, being aware of yourself, being aware of what you feel. For sure. That's all in life. That's always the case. But it all comes down to pure view.
Because one of the thing that attracted me to you was like the first time you mentioned that you were a baker.
Yeah.
I was trying to ask you, what did your teacher have you do? It's like, you just told me to be a baker.
Yeah.
So when did you start becoming a baker? And how did that bridge the gap between like the mundane and the divine? Like just baking. And why baking?
I stopped working as an art teacher and I needed a job and I wanted to move near the community. So within that circumstance, I was offered a job and a place to stay. So then I started being a baker. I would say fundamentally what I learned through that job is like just training. Learning
Put in
something.
the reps.
Yeah, putting the reps. Learning something new.
Right.
Being precise. Like consistently, every day. No room for error. Yeah. Just over and over and over again. And it's no different than practice. Just over and over again, do it right. Do it correct, do it right. Measure it. So
it was during this time that you met Mei Chen, right? You met him
I
quite
met him
recently, right?
Yeah, about a year ago. I found how he spoke about Dharma very interesting.
It's almost like a multimedia.
Yeah.
It's like
The way he it's like learning his language. It's very particular. But it wasn't that what struck me. It was his his energy. I've never met anyone.
Radiation. Right?
Yeah, like I never met anyone outside of like the Rinpoches I know who had that, and it was just like very unassuming. So I was just like, what the fuck?
So what gave you the idea to introduce Mei Chen to Khan and potentially a partner of some sort?
I didn't know that they were gonna do anything together. I just
you just
basically
didn't-
I was talking to Khan. I was like, dude, you need to talk to this guy.
Is it just like intuition?
Yeah, I was like, you need to talk to this guy. I have a habit of doing this with people.
Have you introduced Mei Chen to anyone else? Or?
No,
Interesting.
I wouldn't dare.
So you kind of came full circle, right? You recently left your farm, right?
Yeah, I'm.
I don't know how much of this you can talk about, but
Yeah,
it's up to you. Like you transitioned from.
I think fundamentally, I got originally my intention with going to Rinpoche and the whole situation. I think I got pretty much what I got out of it.
Okay.
In that sense. So I've been overstaying my
You've been
position.
overstaying. Okay.
Yeah.
So you knew you were kind of overstaying, but what kept you there for all this time?
It's comfortable.
Just comfortable?
Yeah.
You need that exertion,
It's
right?
stable, comfortable.
Yeah.
Everything's. I basically, for my own practice, I ran out of my own aspiration,
Oh, okay.
but I had enough merit to stay, like easily.
But isn't aspiration something that isn't yours to begin with? Or
In a way, yeah. But like my original aspiration for going there was that I wanted to be able to do certain types of teaching, like practices, right?
So you accumulated a lot of teachings and practices and
Yeah.
methods, techniques and empowerments. Right. But then you weren't able to give that away, so to speak. Like,
Yeah, I didn't want to actualize. I'm even the whole Vajrayana thing. I wasn't particularly like I didn't want to do it.
You mean you didn't want to do it after a certain point?
Yeah.
Like, you were like really into it for a very
Yeah.
long time, right? So what was the point for you to like kind of like start self-invalidating Vajrayana? Because I heard concept in the bus today. Every master or every teaching, in order for it to reach completion, you have to self-validate. So in a sense, by leaving Vajrayana, in that sense, you're kind of completing it paradoxically.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Yeah. Like what made me do that?
Yeah.
I just had to be real with myself, you know? Like if it was working for me, that now, you know what I mean? It was, but where I'm at now is in a different place. And I'm kind of not sure particularly what I need to grow further.
Yeah.
But seemingly the structure I'm in right now is where.
Because it was quick though. Like 2 weeks ago, you were still in that phase where you don't know which direction to go. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Now it all clicks together.
I was just like, hey, Albert, you should just come to CC.
Yeah. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, and then you just somehow everything just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
So was there a moment where you felt like you're right where you're supposed to be, like with this whole CC structure? Because this is actually kind of different from how you were
Completely
practicing
different.
before, right?
Yeah,
Let's talk about it, the difference or the similarity between like your old community and this. This is also a community, but it seems like we don't really have a monastery. We call it the invisible monastery. Sort of like this is our practice right now.
Yeah, I would say in some ways it's similar because it's individuals kind of doing their own practice and determining their own growth, right? But then there's like also similar practitioners. You have a teacher. So in that sense it's similar, but the difference is like we don't have like specific forms, like specific things.
It's almost abstract. It's like you can't pin it.
No, you can't.
Yeah. What the fuck is this? What the fuck is CC?
Yeah, you would never.
But everything, in the sense, everything like this is all part of CC, right?
Yeah.
This
It's
interview
very
right
hidden,
here.
but also obvious, but also like fruitionally it feels different.
Fruitionally, it feels different.
Because it's like you are free, but you're also free just to be yourself.
Right.
And it's just relating.
It's just relating, right?
Right.
Because we're in a retreat right now, and then the outdoor practice for the retreat is actually just to be yourself and relate.
Yeah.
And for most people, they can't seem to do that. Like, how do you relate with other realized beings? Because everybody that came to the retreat, at least realized Anatta, right? But like, if you look at other communities, or just in general, like realized beings don't talk to each other. They're like in their own solo realization bubble. Because I think sometimes it can be difficult for people who had awakening to relate to other people. That's why some like just like retreat into the mountains or be in isolation. Coming down from the mountain and just relating with like other sentient beings, that's part of the training, right? That's part of the relational fitness.
Right hand click, left hand dick.
Yeah, I think it's tiring. I think the past few days with a lot of work.
Very difficult.
Because for most people, we're relating on a level where it's conditioned, right?
Yeah.
We're just relating to each other's obscuration.
Yeah. What's it like to relate where there's no obscuration, no processing?
Did you relate to people like that in your own community, or at least attempt to? Or is it still buffered by some
I think
kind of...
in the ideal form, yes. Because in the ideal form, you do have pure view and you do relate like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, obviously obscurations.
In a car today, Khan was talking about what we're doing here as being the end of Dharma. Because it's the end of Dharma, it's actually when everything is Dharma because you can find it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that statement?
It kind of reminds you of Trungpa Rinpoche's Shambhala teachings, actually.
Crazy wisdom? Or
Nah, his
Not
crazy
yet.
wisdom. This is his Shambhala teachings, but basically his Dzogchen teachings. But like he just took out all the Dharma language and just kind of like spoke about this hidden kingdom called Shambhala, which is an enlightened society,
Oh, okay.
right? Creation of an enlightened society. And sometimes we are creating an enlightened society
Right.
and enacting it.
Everywhere we go, kind of. Right?
Yeah, so then it's like completely invisible, but an enlightened society, enlightened relationships. I think it's the pinnacle of what they're trying to do.
It's the pinnacle of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
What would you say is the sticking point for people that were still operating through some kind of obscuration or buffer? Is it an inability to let go of even like Is Vajrayana itself, or like?
Yeah, I mean,
traditions itself?
we get caught in the forms,
right.
caught in the culture.
Even when you're aware of it, obviously you're very aware of those just being forms, right?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah, it's very easy to be caught in.
so
Like
was
I said,
this-
like you just get comfortable.
yeah, like you said,
Right?
it's comfortable, right?
And if you're not applying the actual view, or you are able to even let go of that, let go of Dzogchen, let go of Vajrayana. Here, it's already implicit.
It's implicit, just self-validate,
Yeah,
self-validation.
constantly.
Constantly, right.
So
Because
then it's like,
it's almost like Mei-Chin wouldn't let you hold a view.
no. So then you have to force to be yourself.
Right.
Then that actually is the deity.
Interesting.
Because it's a completely new
It's
deity.
almost so simple, so direct.
Very direct.
It's like even more direct than Dzogchen in a sense,
Yeah.
or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, the teachings exist as a pathway to this.
Right.
So they're all in some sense not definitive. They're all in some sense provisional. Like the actual definitive teaching cannot be taught.
Because it's almost like an iPod that cannot see itself or something
Yeah.
like that, right? Interesting.
it's you're living it.
Right.
It's always evolving, always constant revelation, right?
Yeah.
Look, I don't know what I'm gonna say. You don't know what you're gonna say. We don't know what's going on.
I don't know what's going on.
But like the most wonderful thing about this, like meeting all you guys, is fundamentally because you guys are all doing your own work, because you have done the work. There's no necessarily processing.
What is
I
the
don't-
processing?
There's no eating.
No what?
I'm not eating.
You're not eating.
I don't need to eat.
Oh.
I can just be myself. It's chill.
You don't need to eat. Let's get to that in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the eating part. But I do, because you mentioned Trump, I do want to
Yeah, go
talk
ahead.
about Trump a bit. Like, you gave me a few books. I think one of them was crazy. Actually, you didn't give me the Crazy Wisdom book. I was reading that already. That was an instruction by Mei-Chin for me to read that for this trip. And then you saw that book, and then the way you were describing it just made me want to read it even more. You were talking about how, what's the deal with Trump? I don't know.
So the book
about him.
itself is about
What is it about?
Guru Rinpoche. It's about how
Papa Sambhava.
yeah, an
From the
enlightened,
perspective of Champa. Yeah.
an enlightened being,
Right.
already enlightened, relates with reality. Usually we view it from the opposite. We're on our way to enlightenment,
Right.
right? Then we're done.
okay.
But it's like from being done, how do you relate with reality?
Because Papa Sambhava was supposed to be born enlightened, right?
Yeah,
Lotus,
here he's born on a lotus.
Right.
Lotus is purity. Born already as an 8-year-old on a giant lotus.
But he kind of went through a few rough patches trying to relate to reality in the beginning, right? And he has to iterate.
It's interesting, isn't it?
So that,
Because it's like a meeting of human conventions,
a
meeting of human hang-ups. Like for him, it's like murder, okay. For him, it's aggression, it's okay. It's playful. But then there's consequences. Then he learns the consequences.
Right.
But he just flows straight through it. Not a problem.
So even just that, the origin of Papa Sambhava is kind of like a symbol for the way you just described Dzogchen teaching, right? So Vajrayana, you begin from the
Fruition.
fruition, you begin from the view. You're already a Buddha.
So what is necessary? What is being developed from what is being taught to the Buddha in relating to sentient beings? What is being taught as skillful means? Relating, connecting, teaching. So path of Vajrayana is actually for the Buddha.
It's actually for the Buddha.
Yeah. to develop all the skills, the magics necessary to communicate. Because how do you communicate reality? You really can't. So then you have to create means to bridge.
Oh, like a bridge.
It's an act of love. That's all it is. Because Arhat technically wouldn't have love. Why bother? Why communicate?
An arhat?
Yeah, why would you want to communicate? Fuck, that's complicated. But the Buddha would want to communicate. There's nothing else to do.
So would you say that if you want to go beyond arhatship to become a Buddha, then you have to train in these kind of how to build bridges so you can relate with sentient beings to complete the Dharma from.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, also complete your Dharma.
Right.
Your unique Dharma. Because to be an Arhat, it's not particularly unique.
It's just kind of like a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah,
It just follows
it's
a
fine.
certain
You're
style.
just a meme.
It's just a meme.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But to become real is a different thing. To become authentic, just to arise all your qualities, and then relate. Because particularly each Buddha has a thing they can communicate with beings. Like
That's what Meisha mean by individuation, right?
Yes.
Like being complete means that you're both universal and there's only one version of that completion, which is you, right? And
exactly.
you need to instantiate that.
And that being can only connect with certain beings, not everyone, right?
So that would be your Dharma, your particular
Particular,
way
yeah.
of manifestation and expression.
Will connect and resonate with specific beings.
Well, what would you say your Dharma is so far? Like, because you say you were an art teacher, right? You did art, right? You did art.
I just see the good in people fundamentally and draw it out. And also I see openings where it shines through.
Okay, going back to this Papa Sambhava thing, you mentioned that he had 8 emanations or something like that. What is that about?
Over 108.
Over 108.
But 8 basic ones.
Okay. So why does it need so many? Is that part of how you relate to sentient beings? It's like through these 8.
He's always changing,
Always
always relating, never still, never stagnant.
There was one particular emanation that was really interesting. You said it's the most crazy one. Like what is
Yeah.
it? What is
Dorje
that one?
Trollo.
Yeah. What is that about?
It's just the patternlessness of reality.
Patternlessness. Oh,
Yeah.
really, I really like that. Yeah.
Pure radiance without a radiator. Pure, like, chaos.
Pure chaos. Is that the one where he's riding the tiger, the pregnant tiger?
Yeah.
And that was the one that he instantiated to like kind of blow the Tibetan's minds away or something like that, right?
Because everyone wants pattern. Everyone wants structure.
Right,
What's this pure structurelessness? But how can that be? We generally view that as like, oh, that's horrible. But this pure compassion. It's absolutely, it's ruthlessness. Nothing can, he doesn't allow any samsara to concretize.
Completely groundless.
Yeah, completely.
Right.
So the point of view, like that's terror from our point of view.
That's why some of his emanations are almost wrathful or like they almost look like demons.
Because some people need, the high volume compassion. Nice words are nice. Being sweet is fine. Loving, but sometimes you gotta scream. Sometimes you gotta grab them by the neck. It is what it is. You're not gonna tell if your child is running across the road. You're not gonna. Can you not do that? No, you grab them.
You need some slapping maybe.
Or just say you grab them. You pull them away from harm. Or if someone's gonna harm you or another person, you stop them. Can you not do that? No, that doesn't work.
I see.
You gotta fuck them up.
So like Trungpa is kind of the one that's responsible for bringing Vajrayana Mahayana to the West, right? And then
Yeah, in some sense, he's our what we call like grandfather.
grandfather of Vajrayana.
Well,
so we're all kind of like
the West.
eating his food a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but he's a very controversial figure, right?
Yeah,
like
for
he died of alcoholism. You say he would like sleep with anyone and like he would eat meat. And
He's controversial,
drink
but he's
whiskey.
also
he
didn't hide any of that.
He didn't hide any of that.
he presented himself as it is. So
But you say in your opinion, he also hurt a lot of people.
He
Or
did,
he
yeah.
confused a lot of people, right?
he did because he didn't fit, the idea of what a teacher should be or an enlightened being at all. He was just himself.
I see the point in that. Like I'm just speaking from like someone who might hear this and playing the devil's advocate. Right?
Yes.
How do you know part of that isn't just his own greed or like his own shadow?
You never would know.
You never know. That's the point.
Yeah,
isn't it?
you never would know. He could be completely insane, and he might have been.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. The way I understand
There's
crazy
no
wisdom
guarantee.
is just complete outside of the convention of what's insane and what's sane.
Sure, but that's also a lot of room for abuse.
Yeah, yeah. Which did happen, right? A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it depends on whose voice. I mean, I always side with the victim.
You're excited with the
I
victim.
generally tend to, in general. You know, but it's like it's not that clear cut always. Sometimes it is, but even his students, how do you know? I don't know. Do we have room for crime? It's a dangerous thing. That's why these things aren't talked about. Because it's not. First of all, it's not relevant. The likelihood of a being who can do that, it's pretty rare.
I think the way I understand it is not really to copy him or even to like scrutinize him, but like what does that represent in terms of like taking ownership of all of your afflictions or like embracing emotions and passion and sexuality, things like that, instead of just trying to annihilate them.
Well, a lot of people did try to copy him, and
Didn't end well.
you know the stories of that. Like his heir tried to copy him, and his heir ended up giving AIDS to a lot of his students because he thought it was above that. So
Yeah, interesting.
fuck around, find out. You're gonna play around with that as a student. You have to be careful. You know what you're signing up for. You know what I mean? So always test.
Test.
Yeah. Determine if they're real or not. Determine if you find it useful or not. You can always say no. You have agency as a student. That's the foremost thing. And coming back to like fundamentally, it is about on our path. Like, how do we bring these energies that are chaotic into our practice in our lives, right? Because we are violent, right? We can kill. We do have energies like sexual energies. Like, so what do we do with that? Right.
How do we transmutate that into wisdom? Is
Very difficult.
fundamentally-
Very difficult, right?
For Vajrayana, that's the entire path. Kind of.
It is, and most paths just outright avoid it
Yeah, yeah.
because it's. For most people, it's like, what do you do with all that? It's too dangerous. Yeah.
So the other book that you gave me is called Spiritual Cannibalism.
Yes.
And you mentioned something about being with us, you don't need to eat.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like, because I mentioned you said something about during the transmission, like Mei eats our karma. He likes it. Is this something got to do with that, like eating each other's karma? Or?
Well, I haven't started to teach now. What a teacher does is fundamentally allow openings. And that opening doesn't just happen. You take upon the karmas of another being and you eat them. It's food.
It's food for the teacher.
Yeah. If you're able to eat fundamentally suffering, you have an unlimited fuel source.
Oh, I think Papa Sambhava said he eats like karmas for breakfast.
Yeah.
And turn into wisdom or something.
Yeah. But like with you guys, it's just like,
Is it the same? But
There's no
aren't
karmas.
There's no karmas.
yeah,
So when you relate it with, it doesn't feel like there's karma to be eaten.
not really, no.
But what's the fun then? Don't you like to eat? No,
Yeah, just hanging out.
just hang out. But
We're kind of eating each other's qualities, but it's different.
it's different. We're
'Cause
not pure.
it's not suffering.
It's not suffering. Right. Where do we get our fuel from? Just
The good qualities.
the good qualities.
Yeah, the enjoyment.
It's almost like the eating and the eaten and the eater. It's all
Yeah,
become
but
like unified. Or
But
something,
even
right?
with like when you're with students,
Yeah.
it's not always suffering that you're eating. Like you're eating their good qualities too. That's how you can see them.
Oh,
And
I
they
see what you mean.
and they eat you,
Yeah, they eat you. Right.
right? And then it's like a mixture, and that's fine. It's like beautiful. It's an exchange. I mean, eating might be not the appropriate word, but that's kind of what it feels like sometimes.
So it's kind of like what you're saying is that in terms of relating as a guru and a student, which you have a lot of experiences with, it feels like one is eating the other, and the
Yeah.
other is allowed the
And vice versa.
vice versa. But then when you're relating with people in CC, it feels like the gap between the eater and the eaten, it's almost non-existent.
Non-existent, and the meal, if we do eat, is way better.
It's way better. It's just like icing on the cake.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
we just enjoyed a really nice,
More refined meal.
more refined meal.
Yeah.
Right. We just had a really nice dinner, brunch, or
Yeah.
whatever that was, and it was just everyone on the table, and we just
So everything,
Just
just
everything.
It's about enjoyment, right? But when you're with beings who are suffering, I mean, maybe that's my flaw. I don't enjoy it as much, but I do it anyways because you love beings. So
And then you are now a mentor too at CC, right? Like, is this your first time actually teaching Dharma, right? Or
formally, yeah.
formally, right? It seems like you just like fit right in. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I taught for 5 years.
You taught art, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just teaching Dharma is like 1,000 times easier.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, 100. It's just way easier. Teaching art, fucking impossible.
Interesting.
Yeah, Dharma's easier.
So you said you majored in illustration?
Yeah.
Okay. That's something we have in common. We were both went to art school.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I went to art school too. Yeah.
Nice. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then when you taught art, were you teaching just illustration? Are you teaching how to do still life,
Touch
life
art,
drawing?
painting, drawing, ceramics.
It's like college or?
I
school?
taught middle school and high school.
Oh, nice.
A little bit of college.
A little bit of college. Okay. So with the experience of teaching and all those empowerments and methods that you accumulated, right now you just are able to just instantiate it.
Yeah. In some sense, it's bringing all these things together, and it's synchronicity, right? And I'm able to apply it. It's kind of cool. For me, it felt like, these are just past things that are segregated. And it's like, I'm never gonna do it again.
But then you bring them back as part of your Dharma.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it
I
kinda
kind
works
of
out.
relate too because I played the violin and did like filming videos and whatever, and then I'm just kind of doing that too. But then now I'm using them as a means to, I guess, manifest Dharma.
Yeah.
Something like that. Not all the things I did was just like there's nothing that went to waste.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's like that. Feels like that.
Feels like that.
Feels like I'm cohesive. Like it's all like.
And also when you speak, it's just like you have a way of speaking that it's just like when I watch you speak, it's just like, oh, this is someone who's been teaching Dharma for like 20 years.
I think it's a lot because I did talk a lot about it with a lot of people.
Oh, okay.
And I shared a lot over time. So I know how to talk about kind of my experience, fundamentally.
Kind of what?
I can only speak about my experience.
Right,
and what works for me. And
It's almost like there's a mixture of like being very authoritative, but powerful, but also very humble at the same time.
yeah, because I respect who I talk to and like where they're at and who they are. And I don't want to impose and narrate or even interpret their experience. I'm not interested in that. To me, everyone is so unique and like, it's like, oh, what are they going to bring?
You also give me a sense that you also just learning too. Like,
Yeah.
like we're all just learning too, right?
Yeah.
Even if we're teaching, we're
Fucking, I'm learning from you.
That's what Machen said too. He's like he's learning from all of us, and we're learning from him.
Exactly.
That's what you mean by the Eden and the Eden.
Yeah. We're
Each other.
sharing. We're
Yeah,
sharing.
we're
We're
sharing.
sharing each other. And like, there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
Even if I know like I am and Anatta, it's like, okay, if you can express it differently, it's like beautiful to hear.
Right.
It's like, okay, what is it like for you? Like, because it's different.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just all about me.
Yeah. Or like just about Anatta.
I'm not particularly even interested in myself. I mean, that's why I like teaching. Is like it allows me to look at other people. It's like, wow, they're not me, and that's cool.
Interesting.
That's way more interesting.
That's it's almost like it's just like making art in a sense.
Yeah.
Or you're kind of like molding each other's mind or something like that. Or like,
yeah, it's a dance.
It's a dance.
It's a relationship.
So would you say that's kind of tantric, or
I mean, yeah, in some sense, yeah. Tantra means to weave.
to weave?
And it also is, it's to weave. It's weaving all the different aspects of you into a cohesive continuity.
With others and with the environment. Right?
We are not alone. We are a product of everyone. So when
I
you
mean,
are
in a sense,
related,
everything is tantra in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Just how depending on how you perceive it.
yes, that's the point.
There's another book that you gave me that it's a pretty big textbook. You said everything that you know is in that book. It's
Yeah.
called Tibetan Yoga.
Yeah,
Or
it's
something
like
like
it's
that.
like the
It's a lot of like energy centers. It's
like a
things I don't
it's
know
like a
nothing
dictionary
about.
almost,
It's
right?
a dictionary. It's things I don't know anything about.
yeah.
And I was like, hey, I actually want to take your class too, just to learn about that stuff.
Yeah.
How do you think that would help someone who is already like had an initial realization, but then they think they don't really need the energy stuff. They're like, oh, this is like too
I don't
esoteric.
understand how you could be interested in any of this stuff and not be into energy.
Because it's all energy, or
Yeah, if you deconstruct the physical view, what's left is just energy. What is energy? It's just relationships. Because literally, energy is like chi means relationship. It's no different.
Well, Machen even said the realization of like not self or anatta is actually just instantiated relationship, because if there's no you, there's only relations.
Yeah.
Ways of relating.
Yeah.
So what is that book about? Like, it's a collection of Tibetan yoga techniques or philosophy?
Yeah, I
or-
think it's just like a dictionary of just the whole Tibetan ideas, practices, you know.
So you learn a lot of that from your Rinpoche or just from your
Yeah, just Rinpoche and just been in that world. Yeah,
So your practice prior to this, like
all that stuff.
all
yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah, that worldview.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people who like take your 7B class would be able to get a taste of that. Like you would be able to take Mei-Chin's transmission and then transmit it, redirect it in a way where it's more or less from that lens, from the tantric lens, or
It could
or
be. It
basic
depends.
techniques. Like
Yeah.
how would you provide for people, which is just what's missing in previous bootcamp is like basic techniques, how to breathe, how to even sit properly. How would you fuse that with Tibetan yoga and all the Vajrayana practice that you had to like CC, to Mei-Chin's
I mean, I guess it entirely depends on the individual and what they need.
So there's no like specific curriculum you have.
No, I don't think it's. I think it's unnecessary. If you, a teacher, can see what someone actually needs to get to the quick, they need to get there, just to be able to yoga transmission. If they could just get there, that's what they need to do. So how do you route them to be able to just do that? Because once they're able to do that, that's a whole path on itself. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I think so.
So like that's basically what basic is trying to do. Like
To prepare the acolyte to yoke into the transmission.
whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. But
And
then
it-
since you have so
it
many
might
different
not. It might not be everything.
techniques and stuff. Yeah.
Someone might just need to just get their posture right and like know where to look, and they just might be able to leap.
Right. That's
Like-
because you have this whole repertoire of
Yeah.
like,
So why
techniques and
why
empowerments.
fuck around? Like let's just go there.
Yeah.
But no one is able to see that from where they're at.
Right. Because they don't have this training, the
Yeah, yeah.
foundations. Right.
But if you're able to route them as a teacher,
Oh, okay.
that's the beauty.
What about someone who can just yoke into transmission right away?
Yeah. Then okay.
But then
If they can't, okay, if they can do that, that's great. But then it's like they might need to do certain practices to stabilize that.
stabilize it or like
Or
bring it
stru-
to life.
or bring structure to the life.
Oh, okay. So the basics not just for basics people actually, right? It
No.
can be good for everyone.
Because you might be able to yoke, but then you might need to go back and be able to just sit,
Right.
right? Or like know how to use it properly.
How to use it.
Yeah.
Like how do you use it when you like just go about your everyday life or something like that?
Yeah, or how to sit with it, how to let it purify your system. Like, okay, then what? Like, how to use breath to purify a system, right? How do you use the transmission to do practices? So then from that, you can actually take the transmission and do your practices from that lens.
Oh, okay. So
Like
from
from-
the bottom
yeah.
up to and then top to
Yeah,
bottom.
so then what is it like to just do breathing practice from that point of view?
Right.
Completely different, right? Because you're not trying to get somewhere anymore. Like the practices themselves are fruition.
Right. And that would be more like the Vajrayana lens.
Yeah.
Right.
Isn't that cool?
So, it's
then-
almost like a little fractal.
Yeah.
Like
So
you can
then-
come from the Sutra or from the Vajrayana,
Yeah.
all enclosed within like.
Precisely.
Okay.
So then you can like re-look at like, oh,
Interesting.
basic mindfulness is like completely fucking different from the point of view of the view.
Or even like doing Vipassana from the view. would be
Absolutely-
different
absolutely
from doing Vipassana from the ground up.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
So it would recontextualize everything you're doing. And then you could start from the basics again and be like, it just would be like mind-blowing. Because what is the point of practice fundamentally? It's to be able to just sit and be yourself.
Or not, you just be yourself when you're not sitting, right?
Yeah.
Just be yourself. Yeah.
Just be yourself. Well, how hard is that? It's too simple.
It's too simple. Is that what you said?
It's way too
It's way too simple. All right. It's just like almost like realizing the nature of mind. Just right underneath you know that you can't even see it.
Yeah. So then you need to tire your system out. But you should also tire your system out in a way that when you get it, you become a perfect vessel for it. Or able to just like,
Well, you said tire your system out?
yeah, tire your system out.
Like what does that mean? Like
It
exhaust
means, yeah, exhaust.
your karmas
Yeah,
and stuff like
that's
that?
why you train.
That's why we train.
Yeah.
Right? So
You
in a way,
lift.
all this prostration, even you baking, teaching art, that's just a path of exhausting your karma and turn into dharma.
It can be.
It can be.
Or it could be literally the
The opposite?
presentation of realization itself.
Oh. So you're just accumulating more karma.
Depends on where you begin.
Right. That's why the view is important, right?
You start with the view.
Start with the view. And the teacher is important to point your bullshit
Yeah.
and other people.
Yeah. Because if you don't,
Practice.
where you start from
Yeah.
is where you end. You start from suffering, you're going to end in suffering.
You think so?
Always.
But isn't everyone's starting point suffering though?
Yeah. But you always end in suffering.
But then if you end in suffering after completing the path, so to speak, then the nirvana and samsara will be indistinguishable, right? Is that what you're saying? But what will be the point of coming back to suffering then?
I don't know. If you basically meditate on your suffering all day, you're going to just end up with more suffering.
You think it's going to be more?
Yeah, because it's an infinite causal loop on itself. How
But
do you
isn't the goal
how
to-
do you get rid of that?
But isn't the goal to penetrate through suffering and not suffer?
If you penetrate to suffering, doesn't that just confirm suffering?
So in a sense, you're going beyond even that distinction between samsara and nirvana. Like you
Yeah,
don't even
like-
look at suffering the same way, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You don't
yeah.
relate to suffering differently. That's
Well,
fundamentally what you're saying.
Would you? Yeah, like the issue with suffering is that you are creating it. So whatever you do to get rid of it
It's still just from the same condition.
is that you're basically coming. Yeah, you're coming from the point of view of you not doing it and trying to get rid of something you're not doing. It's like, just don't do it.
So you're not from that view, you're not trying to get rid of suffering. You're not trying to dissolve conditioning, even, right?
Because if you do that, you're only gonna
It's it's
Create
only
it.
called Ouroboros, like
Yeah,
the
basically-
catch-22, right? Yeah,
whatever you do to fix the problem only confirms the problem,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So you have to be careful where you start.
So would you say if you don't start with the right view, then you just try to clean your obscuration with more obscurations, and
Yes.
you're fucked.
Yeah. Where you begin is where you end. That's a brutal truth.
But then if somebody begin with the wrong view, there's still a chance for them to. You know,
I hope so,
You hope so.
but there might not be.
Remember. Okay.
It could be
Because so many
10.
people come to the
Yeah.
CC, they don't have the right view. But then through the entirety of the boot camp, even the last cohort, almost everyone at least has a view, but maybe it's not stabilized. Right?
Well, it's
So
kind
there-
of
there is
that's
a chance,
that's the
right?
magic
So-
of the teacher, yeah,
the magic of the teacher,
right.
the
But in
teacher.
any other place, right?
Yeah, any other place. Let's
10
say they
years,
go to
20
Vipassana,
years,
20 years,
30 years,
Yep.
doing the same thing over and over again, right?
Most people are like that.
Where did they go? Where they began?
Right.
Still in the same place.
They would just find another teacher,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's still looping.
Yeah. But if you have something outside the system constantly radiating, penetrating,
That's what we do every day in the bootcamp.
yeah. So then, good chance.
Good chance. Okay.
Not ultimately perfect chance, but more possible,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's you know.
I think this is good. We can
Yeah.
leave it here.
Okay,
All right. Thank you, Albert.
that's good.